stellar, I think. I taught biology. I'm the wrestling coach, that's right.
Before we start, I'd just like to say a little something on behalf of a very important person that couldn't be here today, my mom, Barbara Wilson. My mom, unfortunately, has multiple sclerosis, and she's almost completely bedridden, suffers from dementia, and can't even sit in a chair for more than about 10 minutes without suffering excruciating pain. So there was just absolutely no way she could be here today. Trust me, if there was, she would definitely be here because she loves my dad so much. Yeah, she really did. And you know, I'm here to tell you, if she was here, she would be running this thing, man. I mean, she would be in control. She would have every minute accounted for from point A to point Z. We wouldn't be starting at 3:25. We would have started 25 minutes ago. I can promise you that. She'd probably have Mayor Villa Ragosa here. Probably would have had valet parking, and I'm sure you would have probably all wish she was here when we hear about the valet parking thing. But yeah, you know, unfortunately, you're not going to get that kind of planning from me and my brother. So sorry, folks. You're stuck with me, and I can already hear Dad up there shaking his head, saying, "Heaven help us! Old Numbnuts is running the show." Don't worry, I'm not really running anything. I'm just giving it a little jump start, and if it goes the way my dad wanted it to go, it's just going to take off and have a life of its own. When my brother and I talked to my dad about what type of memorial he would like someday, he said, "Whatever you do, don't make it some stuffy, sad thing." He said he would love it if people just stood around talking, eating, drinking, and most importantly, laughing while they shared stories about it. By the drinking, I know he meant beer. Unfortunately, they don't allow beer here, and the fire department's right across the street here, so I think he'd be okay with the coffee, tea, and lemonade as long as everybody's having a good time. On the other hand, if anyone wants to meet me down at Naja's for a toast afterwards, that's where I'll be, probably with a El Segundo Hyperion Stout in my hands. But I digress. Where was I? Talking, eating, drinking, laughing. That's how my dad wanted it. So in honor of Ken Wilson, that's pretty much what we're about here today. Okay? Luis Proenza is going to start us off with a prayer. I'm going to say a few things about what my dad was like as a father. My cousin Mayor Hayes, who always has a good anecdote or two, is here. Taylor Boring, one of his oldest and dearest friends, is hopefully going to have some stories about his college days. By chance, is Brian Jaffe here? Okay, Brian couldn't make it. He wasn't sure if he's going to be able to make it. He had a previous commitment, so he won't be speaking today. But we've got some of my dad's officiating buddies here. Ray Geierman, Gary Van Zant, and Steve Kordak. We're all going to say a few words. Then anyone who would like to grab the mic and say something or share anything is certainly most welcome to do so. After that, we have until 5, and I don't know how much time it'll be then, but my dad would be so pleased if everyone he touched during his life just enjoyed the gathering. So anyway, right now I'd like to introduce a very close friend of the family, Mr. Luis Proenza.
I've known Ken for, I believe, almost 20 years, and so it's an honor to be here with you and to celebrate his life through two prayers. One of them is basically in the last days, he was always very worried and saying, what shall I say when I go to heaven? What shall I say? And so there is a prayer of St. Francis of Assisi that he says the following. One moment, I can get it older. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there are hatred, let me know love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may seek not so much to be consoled, but to console. To be understood as to understand. To be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. And in the last day of his life, I was helping the family to build a ramp for him to go home, and he was very hopeful to go home. And so that night, when we arrived to the hospital, and we were saying, so tomorrow you are going home, he didn't say too much. He was very, his face, it shows that he was happy about it. But unfortunately, of course, he didn't go home the way that we expected, but he went home another way. So that is the second prayer that I would like to pray to you. Going to heaven where I am gone, release me, let me go. I have so many things to see and do. You mustn't tie yourself to me with tears, just be happy that we are some years. I gave you my love. You can only guess how much you gave to me in happiness. I thank you for the love you each have shown, but now it's time I travel on alone. Do grieve a while for me, if you must, then let your grief be comfortable by trust. It's only for a while that we must part, so keep our memories within our hearts. I won't be far away, for life goes on. For if you need me, call and I will come. Though you can't see or touch me, I'll be near, and if you listen with your heart, you will hear. All of my love around so soft and dear. And then, when you must come this way alone, I'll greet you with a smile and say, welcome home. Amen.
You know, when someone really close to you, like a father, passes on, at some point you're faced with going through at least some of the stuff they leave behind. And that's what my brother and I were doing this past week. And I have to say, there were a lot of nice surprises and some reminders of things we hadn't thought about in a while. We found a patent for the incubator that my dad's father invented. My dad's father owned a hatchery in Merriam, Kansas, which my dad worked and managed growing up. There were lots of cool pictures, and even some of my dad's musings. When he was younger, my dad did a bit of writing. He had a column in the college newspaper called Ken's Comments. Comments spelled with a K, of course. We also found some really touching poems he wrote about Mom. And then there was a hand-typed note that I'd like to share. I don't know for certain if he wrote it. All I know is it sure sounds like him. Even if it was just something he liked enough to type a copy for himself, I think it says a lot. It's called The Perfect Father. The perfect father gives all that is needed, not all that is desired. Provides an atmosphere of security, not a haven against the world. Builds pride in accomplishments, not monuments to failures. Encourages dreams through reality, not nightmares from irresponsible wishing. Disciplines because of love. Is not permissive through weakness and lost desires. Stands tall, an example of warm strength, throwing a cool shadow. Not a tower of cold steel, unbending and ungiving. Questions to stimulate growth and miracles. Not to disparage and stun achievement. Loves always, loves always. When I read that, I see so much of my dad in there. I always felt his love so strong. How much he cared was evident in almost everything he did. He was always so positive. Even when he was trying to teach you a lesson, it was usually in the form of some sort of teasing, not a stern lecture. He could discipline with the best of them, but not too long after you were punished, he would always make sure that you understood exactly why. He was a father and a best friend all rolled into one. He was sensitive yet tough. He was strong yet not overly protective. I remember a Little League game one year when my dad was coaching my team. One game the umpire didn't show up, and my dad was elected to take his spot. Well, you can imagine, most of us were around 10 years old at the time. My dad's got the mask on behind the plate. We're thinking, we got this one in the bag because we're going to get all the calls, right? Nope. Quite the opposite. Of course, years later, I realized what he was doing. He was put in an awkward position, and he was going to make sure no one went home from that game saying, boy, old Wilson sure rigged that one for his son's team, didn't he? But at the age of 10, I just didn't think about that side of it. To make a long story short, of course, I came up with the game on the line. Last inning, down by a run, runners at second and third, 2 out. I fouled the first 2 pitches off. Next pitch was way over my head. Counts 1 and 2. The next pitch would become the most talked about pitch in Wilson household history. It was a borderline pitch. I thought it was a ball. I thought it was outside. Strike 3! Pitcher stuck his tongue out at me, made fun of my trombone playing, and told me I couldn't even hit, even when my dad was the umpire. I was livid. My dad had taken my chance to be the hero away from me. I packed up my things, got in the car, and in that instant made up my mind that I was never going to speak to him again. He didn't say anything at first. But then when we were about halfway home, he said, son, why didn't you swing at that pitch? Something about the way he asked that question made me realize what I should have realized before. My dad actually thought that pitch was a strike. And he was the umpire, and the umpire has to be fair. That simple realization instantly took most of the sting out of what had just happened. Not all of it, but most of it. And all of a sudden, I found myself renouncing my earlier vow of silence. Because that pitch was outside, I argued. And so began the great debate that was to rage on over the years. I think the last time we talked about that pitch, my version of it was that it was so far outside it would have hit a right-handed batter. My dad's version, home run ball. Right down the pipe, all you had to do was swing. But you know, whenever we would talk about that, it always reminded me of how my dad always tried to treat people equally and fair. It was almost a kind of contradiction in a way, because one of his favorite sayings over the years was, fair? Fair? Whoever told you life was fair? Certainly not me. You better get used to it, because most of the time, life isn't fair. Boy, more real, true, and scary words have never been said. But when my dad said them, they were oddly comforting in a way. Because as his son, you knew when he was around, he was always going to do his best to actually make it fair. And that was a great feeling. How many people here had security blankets growing up as a kid? I'll admit it, I was in the Lions Club. Mine was yellow, named Alatu. I have no idea why.
Oh, it was a yellow blanket, and it would be hanging on the line, or you'd be going to bed, and your mom would give you the blanket, and she'd say, "And the yellow one too." To be Lola too.
That is awesome. I never knew that. I told you she always had a good anecdote or two. That's Mara Hayes, ladies and gentlemen. Wow. That's okay. So anyway, where was I? Oh, okay. Anyway, so for a couple of years, I wanted that thing with me everywhere I went. My dad loved to tell stories about me and that blanket, and how worn out it was by the time I finally gave it up at the age of 3 or 4. 5 or 6? Anyway, at some point I gave it up. Anyway, he used to always talk about that, and I'd say, "Is that why I gave it up, Dad? Because it was so worn out?" "Not sure, son. One day you just didn't want it anymore." I didn't tell my dad this at the time, but I had a pretty good idea about why it was so easy for me to give up and just up in 86 that blanket one day. I had traded it for the best security blanket in the world, Ken Wilson. His enthusiasm and support gave you the courage to reach for the stars with joy. Yet his good-natured teasing always kept you firmly grounded with humility. As long as he was there backing me up, and he always was, I was good. And now, that security blanket's right here. Sayings and catchphrases. Boy, my dad had a lot of them. The earliest one I can remember was when I was really little. If he saw me getting down or getting too serious about something, he'd always walk up and give me a little poke, or maybe knock over my Lincoln Logs or something like that. And I fell for it every time. "Hey," I'd say. And he'd point down at me and say, "Straw's cheaper." Stupid, I know, but at 5 years old, it always made me smile. Here's another one from a little later on. "Son, are you all right? Because you don't look so good." "What do you mean, Dad?" "You look like you're coming down with a big case of rectamitis right now." Translation, son, you're acting like a real horse's ass. This one's going to sound like I'm doing an impression of Tom Hanks, but I swear this was one of my dad's way before A League of Their Own. "Are you crying? Are you crying? Why are you crying? What do you have to cry about? Yes, I see you fell off your bike and you're a little scraped up, but we're going to wash that up right now and stick a Band-Aid on it. So why are you crying? Did you break any bones? No. Are you homeless? No. Did you get something to eat today? Yeah. So what could you possibly have to cry about?" And by then, you had usually A, completely forgotten what the hell it was you were crying about, and B, completely stopped crying. Let's see. Here's a situation I imagine comes up now and then in almost every family household. That moment where you or one of your siblings doesn't eat everything on the plate. That something left uneaten is usually green and healthy, and the person refusing to eat it is usually threatened with no dessert. Not in our family. "You know, if you don't eat those Brussels sprouts, we're going to be forced to bring out the mung, and then we're going to have to make you eat that." That was always followed by a 2-minute description of what mung was going to be that day. It was always the most disgusting thing you could imagine, usually made my mom leave the room, and always ended up in me eating my Brussels sprouts. Although I have to admit, sometimes I would just leave something on the plate so my dad would talk about Mom. A very good friend of my dad's recently reminded me of this one in regards to refereeing. When officiating any athletic contest, it's preferable for those in attendance to, after the game, it's preferable for those in attendance to say, man, those refs were real sons of bitches. As opposed to, you mean those sons of bitches were actually real refs? This one used to like to throw at me all the time when he least expected it. Are you aware that you have an appointment with Dr. Clapsaddle in 5 seconds? How many people here are familiar with Dr. Clapsaddle? Those of you who know him know that Dr. Clapsaddle was something else. He was enigmatic. What was it about that name? I could never figure it out. He would never tell me where he came up with it. It sounded vaguely obscene. I always felt there had to be some meaning behind it. Maybe an inside joke. Maybe some sort of dirty joke that the family wasn't allowed to hear. Anyway, I was intrigued. So this past week when my brother and I were sifting through my dad's stuff, we found a clue. As you can imagine, I was excited. Lo and behold, all by itself, a library card from a book checked out in 1955 last, called The Doctor's Mayo, and the author is Clapsaddle. Spelled with 2 T's, not 2 D's. I would have figured. So of course I had to track down this book, and you can imagine my disappointment when I finally did to find out it's written by somebody named Helen Clapsaddle, not Clapsaddle, and it's just about the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. So another dead end. If anybody has any enlightenment on that subject, I would love to hear it. So who was this Dr. Clapsaddle? He was debonair. He was king of the paddle tennis court. He was energetic. He loved his Diet Coke. He loved an occasional cigar. On our backyard basketball goal, he was either Wilt Chamberlain, Willis Reed, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Dave Cowens, Walt Bellamy, or even Mel Counts, depending on the day. He was the tallest, so he always had to be center. He was tireless. He was always joking. He loved his cars, but rarely kept any longer than a few years because he couldn't resist trading them for something different. He did, however, always make sure he had at least one convertible. He had built-in radar. And I know it had to be radar because his hearing was never that good. But I swear, if you were his son and you were in high school and you stayed out a little bit too long with your friends one night, way past curfew, and you needed to try and sneak in the house, you could park your car 1 block down the street, creep in the front yard, slowly open the front door, and slowly close it in a period of about 5 minutes because you were going so slow as to not make a sound. Expertly tiptoe across the floor, and just when you thought you had made it, you'd hear this. I heard you 5 steps ago, don't even bother. Better get to bed because you got chores starting 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. And the worst part about that was, now my mom was awake. What? He's just getting home. Oh boy. Dr. Clapsaddle was always there for you when your car broke down. He was a superhero who wore glasses. Those glasses. Most of the time they just sat there on his nose and made him look cool. But every now and then he'd make a grab for those glasses, and if you were his son, that was never good. There were 2 ways those glasses could go. Allow me to demonstrate. First one was down and to the right, like so. Translation. You've just said something so ridiculous, I can't believe this is my own son standing before me. The next one is slowly and up. And my buddy Pete knows all about this one. Kind of just went like this. Translation. You've just done something so horrendous, I believe my corrective lenses are playing tricks on my eyes. Let's see, what else? Dr. Clapsaddle was a skilled rapper. Okay, maybe not skilled, but when he tried, he was funny as hell, and a lot better than Jerry Jones. He could never, ever watch an NBA basketball game without criticizing the refs. He loved playing golf with his buddies. He cared for his students almost as much as his own kids. Yeah, that Dr. Clapsaddle was one hell of a guy. And I'm here to tell you, that Ken Wilson was all the father you could ever ask for. All right, now our next speaker is really showing a lot of heart just to be here today, because I know she's not 100%, but bless her heart, here she is, and you guys are in for a real treat because she can really light up a room. My cousin, Mare Hayes.
Well, Lee, you're a lot like your dad, full of it. I have to say, I haven't seen Lee in an adult role, because he's just my little cousin. And I'm so impressed with the job you did today. Excellent. That's what happens when you have parents who are teachers. You learn how to talk, right? Okay, Ken joined our family. You can see the wedding pictures over there. May 26, 1961, he met my Aunt Barbara, who, even though she's my aunt, she was only 8 years older than me. He met my Aunt Barbara in September at Beverly Hills High School, where they were both teaching. And Valentine's Day, he proposed, and May 26th, they got married. And that was fast. I mean, we just thought my aunt would never get married. I mean, after all, she was like 27 years old, and that was really old to not be married. She was like an old maid school teacher, right? You know? But when you look at the pictures and you see how beautiful she was and how handsome Ken was, you can understand how this came together. And then, of course, they were meant to be because they were Barbie and Ken. I don't know if any of you have thought about that before. I was the maid of honor, and my sister E was a bridesmaid, and my cousin Sue was the other bridesmaid. And that just shows you how important family was for us, that Barbara would choose us to be her bridesmaids and not her sorority college friends. And we were really impressed with the fact that she chose us. And I think that was the first wedding I had even been to, and here I was in it. We had to do that little slow walk that they used to do, you know. Now, you know, they practically dance down the aisles, but Ken became a good part of our family. Always full of smiles and laughter, and we really enjoyed having him join the family. We never quite knew how old he was because Ken was kind of a jokester, and he told my Aunt Barbara 2 or 3 different birth dates. And so I just knew his birthday was towards the end of August and had no clue what year. And also, he always looked so young. He never aged. When I last saw him, he looked as good as he did when I first met him. And it was funny, in the year 2000, my cousin's daughter Lisa was getting married at Lake Tahoe, and Lisa's future husband was from Kansas City. And we were all at Lake Tahoe having cocktails and eating wonderful hors d'oeuvres. Those lamb chops were the best. And my husband and I were talking to this guy from Kansas City. And we're chatting and chatting, and you know, I figured he was He was probably in his 60s, this guy, maybe even into his 70s. And he looks over and he goes, "Hi, that guy looks like my basketball coach." And I said, you know, well, maybe he was your basketball coach. He used to teach in Kansas City and he coached basketball. And the guy goes, "That's Ken Wilson?" And I said, "Yeah, that's my Uncle Ken." And so he went over and started talking to Ken. This guy looked 20 years older than my Uncle Ken. I couldn't believe it. Ken just always was this ageless guy, and because we didn't really know how old he was, you know, he was ageless. Every year our family, since about 1956, has gone up on the Kern River at Camp James and gone camping. And we still go. And so we're the longest term family that goes to this campground. And Ken and Barbara were probably one of the first people to buy a Winnebago. And it was one of those really old Winnebagos that was real square. And they had this Winnebago that they bring every year. And Ken would tow the neatest little VW Bug convertible, white. And all the kids would pile into that convertible with Ken, and he'd drive them all around town, and boy, did they think they were hot stuff. And that was a lot of kids. There was Eric and Bobby and Brian and Lee and Chris and Aaron and Eric and I don't know who else, but we just always had fun with that VW Bug. Ken also had a motorcycle that he'd bring up, and sometimes he'd take the kids for a ride. Not that I thought that was a neat thing, and not that I would ever go because I was too scared to get on a motorcycle. Every morning the men, and you've seen some of the men that went to Kern. There's a picture there of 3 men. Ken's in the middle, my dad Joe, and my Uncle Grant standing there with fish. That was at Kern River. But every morning they'd get up and they'd go golfing. And my dad was very much, this is the way it is guy, and if you hit the ball 4 times, you wrote down a 4 on your scorecard. But my Uncle Ken, he was kind of creative. And you never knew what his score was. And that's where I heard about mulligans. So, but they'd go golfing every morning, and I don't know how they could do it. I went once and never again. But it was hot. One time there were baby rattlesnakes in a hole. One time a coyote ran across the golf course, but they went every morning, and you know what? The guy's still going. The women are so smart, they stay back in camp and just enjoy the river. Bob, my husband Bob, was a teacher and was a great storyteller. He had thousands of stories. And Ken, he was a great storyteller. He always had stories. And sometimes Ken's stories, right in the middle of them, he'd let out a big yell. And the kids, the little kids, would just jump and get all scared. But that was always a fun time, the 2 storytellers up on the Kern River around the campfire. And then Chris, his younger son, where is Chris? There you are. Chris loved the fire. We had to watch him. He loved that fire. But he kind of grew out of it. There haven't been any fires around his neighborhood. So. The stories were great around the campfire. And even though some of us are still teachers, we just don't have that storytelling that Uncle Ken and my husband Bob had. It's a thing I miss at Kern River, the good storytelling. We would usually celebrate Christmas at Barb and Ken's because my grandparents lived with Barb and Ken, and of course my grandmother was always in charge of everything, and that's how Barb got to be in charge of everything, and that's how I learned to be in charge of everything. And she was a real strong woman, and she knew exactly how she wanted things, and that's how it went. And Ken was so good with my grandparents. And it was so comforting to know that my grandparents were living in the same house, even though there was a service porch in between. My grandmother's on one side and Barb and Ken on the other. And Lee and Chris were so lucky because they had my grandparents to babysit them when Barb was teaching and Ken was teaching. And you don't always have that luxury this day to have family watching with the family. So we'd have Christmas there, and that was always fun. Just lots of kids, lots of good food, lots of cookies and fudge, and everybody telling stories and having a good time. One year, I remember we had an Easter egg hunt at Easter, and it just was, you know, kind of the center of the extended Holman family to be at Barbican's. I asked my oldest son, his son has the flu, so he couldn't come today. What do you remember about Ken? And Brian says, well, he always wore those funny referee shoes. So there you go, CIF. And then my daughter, I said something to her. She's home with the flu too. And I said something to her about Ken, and then she said her little girl, Claire, who's now 5, but the last time she saw Ken was almost a year ago when she was 4. And she was talking to her grandparents, and she said, Grandma's Uncle Ken died. She said, I knew him. I knew him. He gave me ice cream. And ice cream and Ken kind of went together because every year Thanksgiving was at my house. And Ken and Barb would bring maybe 7 or 8 nice big containers of 31 flavors ice cream. And boy, we missed that ice cream. Every year we'd have all the great ice cream. But it just shows you what kind of a guy Ken was. What did he do? I'm there with my grandchildren to see Barb, and he gives them ice cream. Always looking out for kids, always looking out for family. He'll be sorely missed.
All right, next I'd like you all to meet someone who knows a thing or two about Clapsaddle, I got a feeling. He's one of my dad's best friends going all the way back to Kansas City, Missouri, Mr. Taylor Boren.
I'd like to say is, I wish I had a son like Lee to give my eulogy at my funeral. That was a hell of a eulogy. You couldn't have painted a better picture of your father. And all of the things that you said, the mung, the Clapsaddle, he used to introduce himself as Clapsaddle's strange girl. Well, it was in 1952 when I became friends with Ken. We were young men enrolled at the University of Kansas City, and we rented the top story of a 2-story home from a private couple, and 3 of us rented that, and we stayed there all 4 years of our university life. We had the complete run of the place. The elderly couple, they thought we were just like their sons. Came in at all hours of the day or night. Ken used to play music all night long. And some of the stories I can remember about Ken are just exactly what Lee has talked about. Always outgoing, always interested in physical fitness. He lettered in basketball and baseball. He was on the student council. He was president of our fraternity. He was really the big man on campus, no doubt about it. And this thing of his age discrepancy, I think where that came from, the Korean War was on, and he was probably just eligible for it, to be drafted. But since he was needed in his dad's hatchery, he was exempt. So he started to college later as a result of, that exemption. And all working with his dad. In fact, I even went with him a time or two through the little towns in Kansas on the egg route, picking up eggs for the hatchery. But anyway, that was even a thing in college where we didn't quite know his age because he did want to cover that up. Why he started so late getting around to going to university. But he was a great student, a great friend. We always used to tease him about he had these part-time jobs while we all had part-time jobs going to the school there. But he never had to work. He showed movies for the departments of recreation on travel logs. That was one of his big deals at night. And of course, his main job was head lifeguard at this prestigious country club in Kansas City. He really loved that, and of course, he was there with the elite of the town, and he blended in just perfectly with them. He really did. He could handle any social situation you can imagine. But in fact, he even went back with Barb after they were married out here and took care of the pool there. He was not just a lifeguard. He maintained, the chlorine content of the pool and all of that. But I can tell you all kinds of stories. He was, as you well know, just looking at the pictures and his good looks, he was really a ladies' man in college. He had all of the women lined up. I mean, we just couldn't get, I remember one time he had 3 dates in one day. But my paths crossed with Ken many times. After I graduated, I was drafted into the Army, and then I came back to Kansas City and moved back in with Ken. He was still living in that same room house. He was working, of course, to get his master's in teaching, so he stayed on longer. And I had a job interview in Los Angeles. And I was there in Kansas City working as a pharmacist part-time, living there with Ken. But anyway, so Ken said, well, let me go with you. We'll go out to LA for the job interview. We drove out of Route 66, came out. I got the job, and then went back and said adieu to Kansas City and that great environment. Ken stayed on teaching at Southwest High School, which is really a very prestigious high school there. He was also in Pembroke Country Day, which is an exclusive type of school that he taught. So he was always mingling with the upper class wherever he went. He could handle it. He had that ego that just nothing faced it, And so anyway, I encouraged him to come on out to LA. I was out here, and 2 years later he came out to LA, and I had an apartment on the Strand in Hermosa Beach. And I said, come out, you can just move right in with me, which he did. And then he had, of course, the job. I don't know how he got that job at Beverly Hills High. But he got it. And I'm sure if he had the interview, he would have snowed him right away, But, so anyway, then we moved back to Los Angeles. He and I, we shared an apartment in Los Angeles. And of course, he met Barbara there, who was teaching at Beverly Hills High. And soon they got married, and I got married. We both bought homes in Manhattan Beach, and we've been friends playing golf, poker, badminton club, racquetball club, all these years. That association was held up for 60 solid years. Really unbelievable. I'm sure miss him. But Ken played poker with using. He always wanted to play baseball or some weird game in poker. It was hard to keep track of where the cards were, how to play them, which is kind of a metaphor for Ken's life. He was dealt a great hand. Good looks, dynamic personality. He was never, in all the time I knew him, he was never depressed. Never had a crossword. I never had an argument with him that I can remember. No anxiety, no depression, just went, just sailed right on through life. And I sure will miss him, but, I should mention, when, he was in his 30s before he got married. He was a bachelor a long time. And he had many opportunities to win along the way. I mean, they were just, after him all the time, girls, come on. Well, anyway, when he settled down with Barbara, he became a complete family man. He wasn't a Romeo, he wasn't a philanderer at all. He was a solid family man. He thought the world of his 2 sons, that's for sure. And, of course, when Barbara had this terrible health problem, multiple sclerosis and a stroke and all of that, she became bedfast, requiring full-time care, 24/7. He never complained about that once, not even in mention, in conversation. It was just like that was just okay. And he told me, that the last time Barbara, the last time when she was in the hospital, they sent her home from the hospital and told him, we can't do anything else for her, let her go home to die. And that was at least 10 years ago. And he had all the praise in the world for Maria and the other girl who were caretakers. He called them angels and special people. So, but he was just a dedicated guy in everything that he pursued. I sure will miss him. That was a 60-year friendship that I had. Him living in Manhattan Beach all these years, terrific, racquetball club, everything. And even as late as October of last year, he played golf with Joe Zeller and I. One thing I mentioned about Joe, of course, was an old friend of Ken's, his fellow teacher. They were at aviation, so forth. Joe used to call Ken a flim-flam man and a bullshit. Those things, too. He was that, no doubt about it. But I can't even have any sorrow, because if you die early and have a terrible life, but boy, this is a celebration really of Ken Wilson's life today. And Chris and Lee, you've done a fantastic job putting all those pictures up. Look at the crowd of people here coming. And I just hope my eulogy even halfway told how much of a friend he was. All right.
Okay, now I'd like you all to meet Secretary and Treasurer of California Basketball Official Association, Mr. Gary Van Zandt.
Thank you. So I've known Ken probably about 25 years now. And besides being Secretary Treasurer for the California Basketball Officials Association, a statewide group, I'm also the Secretary Treasurer for the South Bay unit here, and I officiate 5 sports. And I think needless to say, Ken Wilson was like a daily aspect of my life in one way or the other. Either officiating with him, going to a meeting with him, watching the ice cream meetings. I always wondered about that. He'd eat these huge things of ice cream meetings, and we're like, "You're gonna eat that whole thing?" And it was gone. That was, of course, that was after 2 or 3 light beers too. All these common threads out there. It's like, okay, now I know where that came from. The name Clapcell. I always wondered about that too. And again, it's like it's too kind of mysterious, so we never really pursued it. But Ken Wilson was he was one of a trillion, I'd say. One in a trillion. He was one of a kind. I was trying to decide what exactly made Ken Wilson one in a trillion, too. I sent emails out to most of the school administrators letting them know about when Ken passed away. And one administrator in particular called me up, Liz Driscoll from Marymount, and she said, "You know, we always liked Ken at Marymount because he'd come here and he'd deal with us and talk to us or whatever, and it was like he had a soft spot for us." And so I replied back to her and told her, I said, "Liz, it wasn't just you. He had a soft spot for everybody, no matter what. If you were a friend or a foe, a teacher, a student, official, whatever it was, he had a soft spot for people like that." And the other thing I'm hearing from people out there too is that he dealt with so many people so well, so fairly. He was, what else makes him one in a trillion? He was the best people person I'd ever seen. He could deal with anybody, talk to anybody, any situation, no matter how good it was or how bad it was. If it was something he had to metal out, discipline for an official or an athlete or whatever it was, he was just one in a trillion there too, the way he dealt with people. So, I didn't want to get misty-eyed or sad up here, because I miss him a lot. I dealt with him every day. I think we're all better people here for having known Ken Wilson. I think we all have a really warm spot in our heart for him. And the one picture I didn't see of him was the one where he had a cigarette and he was pulled this up on his car. And I thought that just epitomized what he was all about, what he was like. Yeah. So I think in closing, just remember, we all knew him, we all get to deal with him, and we're all much better people for that, and the world's a better place because of Ken Wilson. And hopefully we can all just take lessons that we learned from him and pass it down and make the world a better place too.
All right, I tell you, this next guy, in hindsight, this is how I should address today. President of the California Softball Officials Association, Mr. Ray Geierman.
know, I never thought I would be up here for this. The reason is because I always thought Ken Wilson was Dick Clark. I never thought this was going to happen because Ken Wilson never aged. I mean, ever. And I've known him for about 20 years. I've got a question for all of you. How many legends did you know? Well, I'll tell you this. We all knew at least one. Ken Wilson. Ken was one of our softball unit's founding members. I dealt with Ken a lot. And I'm going to briefly speak about Ken as he influenced our unit. I heard humility. I mean, the guy was a real humble man. And here he is, CIF liaison. He has to deal with umpires. Did you hear what that coach did? I had to kick him out. Oh, I'll take care of that, don't worry. And then he had to go to the administration and say, well, my umpire. Ken Wilson was able to take care of any situation. He was amazing. He had to listen to the umpires, and then he had to go to the schools. He got everything done, and everybody was happy. It was like, oh, thank you, Ken. You know, you kick the coach out, and the AD's going, oh, well, thank you, Ken. How can anybody do that? There's only one man I know who can do that, and that was Ken Wilson. That was Ken. He would happily work any game assigned to him as an umpire. He didn't care. In fact, he said to the assigner, hey, just give me the JV games close to home. That's fine. Save those other games for the young guys coming up so they can get more experience. That was Ken. But Ken was more than just an umpire to us. Like I said, he was our CIF liaison. And he took the grievances to the schools, and he got the results, and we all thought, yeah, he's out there fighting for us. We didn't know how he'd fight. He just went up there and got it done, have everybody thanking him for doing it. He would come to our meetings every year, and he guided us on how to contact him with game problems in the appropriate forms to use. So he made us feel good. He made the schools feel good. That was Ken. The South Bay has suffered a great loss. Ken Wilson, we will all miss you, my friend. Thank you.
Okay, next I'd like you all to meet very good friend of my dad's, Mr. Steve Kordak.
One thing about the clap saddle, you would always want to go, that's clap saddle with a K. So you always have to say, clap with a K. So I would call him in the morning and I would say, Clapper with a K, and you go, Kordak! And then we would start our 6, and we always used to talk early in the morning, like 6:15, 6 o'clock in the morning. So, when I sat down to do this, put this together for Ken, I could think about a variety of situations, and there was lots of cool things about Ken. One thing about his Kansas background, especially with the basketball folks here, was that when Ken was a kid, he used to work at the University of Kansas, and what's that one gentleman, his 60-year friend? You can verify this. He used to clean up the stadium.
What name it?
With Dr. James Naismith was his supervisor, and he was the man who invented basketball. So the fact that Ken Wilson knew or worked under interface with Dr. James Naismith, I always thought was pretty cool. So, and then also this gentleman here, when he was talking about Ken being, a ladies' man. Even to this day, my mother, who's 70 years old, keeps talking about, oh, that Ken Wilson, he was such a nice guy. Did you know he called me sexy and vivacious? Came to my wedding reception. She still talks about it. Oh. And then there was things about Ken, especially when you rep basketball with him, that was such a kick. Lee, where's your glasses? Ken would show up at the game with his glasses, I'm sorry. Be at the scorer's table, warm up with the glasses on, and then walk over to the scorer's table, take his glasses off, put them in his jacket, take his jacket off, and ref the game. And no one would say anything. There was no dirty looks, there was nothing. It was just, Ken Wilson. Ken and Lee alluded to a little bit too, was that Ken was actually a very good rapper. Not very good, but there was numerous times at unit meetings that he would get up, room would be full of half the people in the room would be African American, and Ken would start talking about shekels and dinero and all this, and he would get everybody going. It was hilarious to see him do that. And one thing though was Ken as an assigner, and I think some of the people have already alluded to this. In a variety of sports, the way a lot of assigners are, they put themselves first, then they put the schools, then they put the officials. Ken wasn't like that. He put the schools, he put the officials, and then he put himself there. And it meant a lot to people in the unit because you knew that Ken always had your best interest. And when I first started officiating, I would tag along to him when he used to observe the West Coast Conference games at Pepperdine and LMU. And I tell you, he was a big fan of the LMU cheerleaders, and I never understood why. He was like, don't talk to me, I want to watch this routine. And they'd be like, Ken, they're not that attractive. And he goes, I know, but I have a soft spot for them. And then the other thing that Ken, I would always love, because I lived in Westchester, I lived very close to LMU, and whenever he had a game, I would try to go with him, because after the game, we also talked about drinking beer, he loved drinking cold beer, and you could verify this, out of a frosty mug. Oh, yeah. And there was the fireside room that's on the corner of Lincoln and Manchester, and he used to love to go to that place and drink beer after the game. Just 1 or 2 beers, nothing much. So on January 4th, when I learned that he passed away, even though now the fireside room is called it's changed thing, it's upscale. I went in there and I told the guys, hey, I used to come in here with a guy and we knew about the frosty mugs, and the guys treated me very nice, and I had several beers for Ken, and someone even had a drink with me, and I really appreciated how they treated me that night. And then when Ken and I used to go up to Pepperdine, we used to have to meet one spot, and then driving up and down PCH in the Mercedes-Benz that he had, and just the wonderful conversations that he and I would have about, not just basketball, about life, I really, really appreciated. Some of the other really good memories I have of Ken is going to Sacramento for the state final trips in the mid-90s and hanging out with the guys. And I met a lot of people that way, and one thing that always used to impress me about Ken was how happy people were when they saw him. And then Ken would always joke around, oh, well, you know what, my wife is more famous than I am when it comes to Southern Section in the state. And she actually was, and he would go, I need to borrow Barbara's pass so we could get into this game, and that was pretty fun. And then for me, Ken and I, when I talked, we were very close, and in many ways, I did not grow up with a father, and there was lots of times where, Ken, we'd have conversations about life and things, and I always, in fact, I've mentioned this to Lee a few times, that, if I had a dad, I wish it would have been Ken. And I can remember one, actually pretty emotional conversation we had was one morning, called him at 6:15, and I have a 4-year-old, and he's been diagnosed with autism. And Ken and I were talking about it, and I just told Ken that, hey Ken, I hope I can be as good as a dad as you are. And it was emotional for both of us. And he told me, Kordak, you're going to be a great dad, don't worry about it, you've got your challenges in life, life's not fair, you got to move on, and it was just very, very special. I'll always remember that. And I want to end with some one-liners that Wilson always used to use that I liked. Lee stole my one about the sons of the bitches, and I've been using that one a lot lately. But when he used to go before, he used to evaluate officials, he'd always say, the level of play, the level of officiating was above the level of play. And then the other funny line, going back to the ladies' man thing, was that whenever you see an attractive woman, you go, oh, suddenly I'm hungry, and then his glasses went. And then my favorite line, and it was, kind of an adult line, was one morning, it was in the mid-90s, I was a bachelor, spent night out being a bachelor, and I met him and Ken Greenleaf at the famous Winchell's on Manhattan Beach Boulevard in Inglewood, because that's where Ken always used to like to meet. And you could totally tell I'm 5 minutes late. Ken Greenleaf, who's 6'6", Redondo Beach cop, real rough guy. Kodak, you're late. Wilson jumps out of the car and says, Kodak, when I was young, I spent all my money on booze and women, and the rest I wasted. So thank you, and it's been really my honor to come up here and talk.
Okay, does anybody have anything they'd like to share, any stories or anything? Right on, come on up.
But you don't have to come up. Yeah, you can stand up.
Well, I know a lot of people in the room from various roles that I've played in my career. A lot of the basketball officials might remember me sitting at the table announcing Redondo basketball games. But I go back a lot longer than that with Kenny. I did my student teaching at Aviation High School where I graduated. And Kenny was my master teacher in 1966. So I added that up. That's a lot of years. And then luckily for us, when aviation closed, that wasn't lucky, but when it did, Kenny came over to Redondo High. And it was great to have my former master teacher there with me. I realized sitting here today that I'm looking at Kenny's here, and I was way younger than him, and then somehow I got way older than him. Kenny was still out there running up and down the basketball floor in his 70s, and it was just incredible, incredible. I will tell one little story about Ken that those of you who are teachers might appreciate. When he was my master teacher, I had to observe in one period, and it was first period of the day, and Kenny was always a multitasker. He couldn't just be doing one thing at a time, even back then. So first period, this is a true story, he would tape his lecture on a reel-to-reel tape recorder. And in second period, he would play the tape. So that he could do some other tasks. Now, as my master teacher, he said, this is to make sure that the kids get the same lesson. Sounded good to me. But I owe so much to Ken because, as he has to so many of you officials and other people that he's crossed paths with in his life. When I was getting finished with my student teaching, he said, Jim, I want to give you a piece of advice. Teaching is a great career, but you do have a sport that you're pretty good at, and you should consider coaching to go with it. That was 1966, and I'm still coaching tennis after all these years because he was right. Teaching is a great career, but if you add coaching to it, refereeing to it, all of these different things that Kenny influenced us in our lives, it really makes your life just...
Okay, anyone?
My name is Kevin Post, and 50 years ago, this month, I was sitting in your dad's senior high school class for psychology and kind of senior issues and so forth. And as an impressionable teenager, I just was sitting there going, I really like this guy's style. It's like you're trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do in life? I'm going, wow, he's such a good teacher, makes it fun, just really interesting. And I went on to a long teaching career, I think in large part because of your dad. He was also my basketball coach, JV basketball, and once again, we had more fun. My name wasn't Post at the time, when I was a junior in high school. It was Pospisil, okay? P-O-S-P-I-S-I-L. I was always Popsicle to your dad. And he got the biggest kick out of the fact that the two of us met because he really enjoyed my wife, probably because she was so attractive. And so when we would see him at Ralph's over the years there in Manhattan and so forth, I would pretty much think kind of the same thing as many of you. Damn, he looks good. After he retired, I'm going, he was just always kind of a real role model for me with his fitness, and I learned so much that when I think back, you know, I'm sure there's just tons more. But one of the things I just wanted to just quickly share, which I really think kind of fits very well for your dad, as an English teacher, all those years, little Ralph Waldo Emerson piece that I think really applies. It's called To Have Succeeded. To laugh often and love much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the approbation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to give oneself, to leave the world a little bit better. Whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition, to have played and laughed with enthusiasm, and sung with exaltation, to know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded. And I think I speak on behalf of many people in there. I'm a better person for having known you yet.
Oh, I think we got two at once.
Younger man first. Hey, girl.
Considering the game that I had last night, I don't think I had any juice left to run, so that was nice on my activities this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Frank Obregon, and I am the current president of the California Basketball Officials Association. And on behalf of our 3,800 members throughout the state of California, we'd like to extend our condolences and our sympathies to the entire Wilson family. Ken was a very vital and integral member of our association, as many who have spoken before me have indicated. And I was thinking about this for the last couple of days, and I thought, yeah, I think I knew Ken for about 20 years. Of course, then I realized, as the gentleman's mentioned, I was catching up too, so I'm getting older. So it's really about 25. And that, I mean, we're all getting older, right? And we're losing track of time, but really, I've known Ken for that long time. And I can tell you, the things that always struck me about Ken were that the man was just completely, the integrity that your father and whatnot had, the ability for him to communicate with people, his strength, his calmness. I mean, all those things, the attributes that your father exhibited throughout all these years was amazing to me, as Gary had mentioned, because of the position that he had within the section. I was one of those officials that had many a conversation with your father. Some of them were not of my own inspiration, but your dad took me under his wing many, many years ago. And I use the expression, he was in my corner. He was always in my corner, always helpful, always there to lend an ear, guidance, and in many cases a kick in the butt, as you mentioned earlier. The words weren't always smooth, they weren't always easily digestible, but they always were accurate. I had the pleasure of working with Ken many times on the football field. He did a tremendous job. And I can think of so many situations where flags were thrown in football. And as all of us know, coaches are a very calm lot. They never get excited. They never get upset. Their language is clean, like at Sunday school. But when I had Ken on my flank, it was like the Red Sea had parted. Everybody was with the program. They're smiling. There's a pat on the back. I just thrown 3 flags for holding in a row against that coach. No problem. What's he saying over there? I mean, is he throwing us under the bus? You know? Is he really that good? I mean, he could sell an Eskimo refrigerator. I mean, he was amazing what he could do. And I never have had that skill. But the reality of the situation is that he was just a good and genuine man. The last time that I had a chance to speak to Ken was one of those nights. This would have been late October, maybe early part of November. We had a football game, and we had a situation where a young man just lost his mind during the football game. And unfortunately, this resulted in the young man being ejected from the football game. So as part of my responsibility as being the crew chief to call Ken with his function within the CIF. So I wasn't sure to take this when I made the call to Ken as I'm driving down to London, trying to get to a local watering hole. Ken, or I dialed the number on the phone. Ken picked up. Mr. Obregon, how are you? So first off, I guess I'm on speed dial. Not so sure that's a good thing. But I was on speed dial. What happened and where were you? It wasn't, hi Frank, how you doing? How's the family? You know, how's life? Where were you and what happened? So we explained the whole situation to him. What I did. He came back to me, recited it, taking his notes. And I had this vision in my mind, like the Fox Command Center on the NFL games on Sunday. I'm picturing him on Friday night in his Barca lounge. He's got his remote control, watching TV, and about 9 o'clock he shuts it all down. And he's waiting for the phone to ring. All hell's about to break loose. What, about 9:30? And as the calls come in, he just takes his notes and he moves on. I mean, that's what I'm envisioning. Not sure if it's true, but that's what I'm envisioning. So I let him know what happened. Yeah, he takes his note. Well, that phone call lasted about a half an hour. We only talked business for about 7. The conversation that we had was mind-boggling. And I'm going to divert that for a second, because during this time, since we heard about Ken's passing, I really tried to come up in my mind with a word to describe Ken. I think we'd all understand, you know, honest, hard-working, trustworthy, all these words, no-brainer. I'm trying to come up with something a little deeper, and it took me a few days. And the word that came to my mind was loyal. Loyal. Loyalty. Have your back, however you want to describe it. Ken was incredibly loyal to his faith, to his family, to his profession, to us as officials, to the integrity of sports. Would you agree that loyal is a good word? I mean, that really, to me, it really hits home. So in that conversation, in these conversations that I've had with Ken over the years, he clearly exhibited loyalty to me and to us, especially in situations where it would have been very easy to bail. It's not easy calling up an AD or a principal on Saturday, trying to explain the train wreck that we created on Friday. And as good as we think we are, there are moments that we kind of muck things up from time to time. And he had to deal with that. But that's what Ken's strength was, that term of being loyal. So fast forward to that conversation. Ken brought to my attention and brought me up to speed on his illness. And I actually pulled the car over because this was going to be one of those conversations. And I lost my father about 30 years ago. I lost my mother about 8 years ago. So I understand, you know, what you're going through. So I pulled over. And Ken, very matter of factly, explained what his situation was, what his diagnosis was, what the prognosis was. And all of a sudden, we just started talking friend to friend. It no longer was liaison and referee who screwed up a football game. It wasn't anything of that nature. It was just honest, solid human-to-human communication. And I listened, which is not one of my strong traits. I listened for 5 minutes, then 10 minutes, 20 minutes, little give and take back and forth. But he wanted to reach out. That moment in time, he wanted to reach out and extend himself and talk to a human being. That was my opportunity to be loyal to Ken. In the grand scheme of things, on the ledger of life, the amount of loyalty he showed me, like this. That one moment that I extended to him was about like this. But I don't think he kept score. He was more concerned what I had to say. And I said, Ken, you know, I've had family members with this situation, and they fought through it. Remember the words of Jim Valvano. We all know who Jim Valvano is, correct? Coach of North Carolina State. Jimmy V Foundation. And what is his mantra? You don't give up. You don't ever give up. You fight and you don't ever give up. And those are the words I left with him. And we had a wonderful, wonderful conversation. We promised to hook up during the football playoffs and also during basketball, which is the sport that I work. And I think one of his last words to me were, the next time you call me, do it during the day, and I won't ask you about where you were, which is kind of funny. But I do have to bring some levity to this because it is obviously a sad situation. Can we talk about Ken's wardrobe for just a moment? We meet at Redondo High School. And one of the rooms is Greg Fucci's room. We start those meetings August, September, 95 degrees, it's beautiful, shorts, flip-flops, we're all good to go. And then comes, Labor Day, middle of September, and jackets start coming out, long sleeve shirts, sweats, hoodies. By November, we're bringing parkas. You're, what is it, a mile from the water? I don't know, whatever it is. That water looks really good in September. It don't look so good in August, or in November, it's cold. But what does Ken come to every meeting in? Does anybody want to venture a guess? What does he always wear? Shorts. Shorts. I saw those doggone shorts in the montage. Is this not true? But besides the shorts, what kind of shorts are they? It's those bike, I don't know if that company exists anymore. Polyester, double button, polyester, they go about here, shorts. I walked up to one, dude, do you know the calendar flip for the 80s? That used to be a Pepsi bottle before they made it into shorts. If you go next to an open flame, you're going to melt. And he's just laughing. He goes, Frank, I just want to be comfortable. Well, but it's 42 degrees. You're going to get flipping pneumonia. I almost said a bad word. You're almost going to get flipping pneumonia. Okay? So the other part that bugged me about that, correct me if I'm wrong, a majority is powder blue. Kind of blue? Yeah. I'm an SC alum. I love Ken. Love him like a father. So I'm looking at the funky shorts. I'm looking at powder blue. Now I'm having another flashback. And that is, when I was in high school as a 9th grader, early 70s, nobody say 60s, early 70s, my PE teacher wore those same damn shorts every freaking morning. And his goal in life was to get someone to throw up as quickly as possible. So we ran laps. And we did stairs, and we did burpees, and suicides, and all this stuff. We just hoped somebody did it in the first 5 minutes, so we could move on. So I'm looking at Ken every time at a meeting. I see powder blue shorts, and I see my high school PE teacher with the clipboard and the whistle and the crew cut. 2 strikes. So we have to get past that, but nonetheless, he's a good man. And I appreciate you listening to what I had to say, but Ken meant everything to us. The CBOA star is a little dimmer now. It doesn't shine quite as brightly in his absence, and it won't. He will not be replaced. He will be missed forever. And we please appreciate to accept our condolences, and may God rest his soul.
Good evening, good afternoon. I'm John Fier. I'm the president of South Bay Basketball. My condolences go out to the family too. My dad also died, succumbed to the same symptoms that Mr. Wilson had. So when he called me and told me what he had, he knew that when my dad passed a few years ago, and I get emotional about it because when he told me, I just knew it was a matter of not days or weeks, or when was this going to happen. It was just the route that you take. And my dad just took the high road to just give me the full chemo. And he was a sniper in Korea, and he went out just like Mr. Wilson. My dad reminded me of Wilson a lot. Fun, always joking, and gives you names, nicknames. My nickname was Fireball. I don't know why he named me that. But some of the referees here from my unit, our coaches in here may know why. I'm a fiery guy when I'm on the court. I'll say things to the coaches, and I'm an educator. I was a coordinator for deaf and hard of hearing kids, fairly unified, for 30 years. And I recently retired. And so I love children, but mine was special. Wilson was special to me. And those early morning calls, "Hi, Mom, what are you doing?" I'm trying to go to work. I got a game to cover, but my story is going to be about his last game. I worked with your father probably his last game in high school. We got a call, Mr. Van Zandt, you're part of the story. I get a call from him. Gary's sick. We'll start the game. I'll send a referee to cover for him. Who shows up? Mr. Wilson. I said, "Listen, could you find anyone to work?" "Nope. You and I." I did exactly what you said, Steve. Took off his glasses. I said, "Wilson, are you going to be okay tonight?" We're at Windward High School. These guys run up and down the court. And the coaches went to the coaches. They said, "Wilson, why are you working?" "Don't have anybody else. That's all you got." I enjoyed working with him. He did everything like he tries to teach us. Do not cut corners, and you won't have any problems. And what he taught me through all these years is never to cut corners, and you won't have any problems. And to do things right, and things always work out when you do it the right way. I love that man just because of the well, he talked to Steve at 6:30. He must have got to me about 7. And I think our conversation went to about 7:45, because nothing was ever quick with him. It was always a story, what I had to carry through my day. And that story would be that he was a good man. One that I will never forget. I lost him, I lost my dad to the same condition. And that's how I like to look at it, conditions. They're out of our control, but he led his life to the fullest. But when he leaves us, to live our lives to the fullest and do things right and to never go wrong. From all of South Bay basketball, everybody else in here, thank you for letting me speak.
Anyone else?
Oh.
Come on in.
Hi, my name is Connie Smith, and I work at Redondo Union High, and I started there in 1986. And Kendall Clapsaddle, I think he looked at me and thought, oh, she's naive and gullible, and he introduced himself as Ken Clapsaddle. And for the longest time, I thought that was his name. I was talking to somebody about it's so funny when you brought that up. I just thought it was like a random thing, but and I'd say something about Dr. Clapsaddle, and they said, well, who's that? And I'd point, and they go, oh, that's Ken Wilson. So then I learned his real name. But anyway, and my last name is Smith, the most common name. And I remember, here's a little bit more to go on with Clapsaddle, that he told me, he goes, here's my advice. If you go to a restaurant, use that name because you'll get better service and you'll get your table quicker and maybe a better table. So that's the advice I gave me about the Clapsaddle part. And anyway, he was always a lot of fun, and we used to, talk a lot, and just when we had some time, and he'd give me advice and things like that. One thing I want to tell you is your father passed away on the same day my father did, and it's been 25 years. So from now on, whenever I celebrate my father's death, I will think of your death as well. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Edward James, and I have to say a few words this afternoon. I am a South Bay basketball official. I've been officiating for about 29 years now. 25 years with the South Bay unit. And I just wanted to actually just show my appreciation to the family for lending Ken Wilson to us for a little while. And Ken always had something inspirational and was willing to take out time for little old me. I'm not an officer with the South Bay unit, I'm just a regular official. But we've had conversations for about an hour at times. And he always has something for me to think about once the conversation was over. And he's always an expert on many subjects. I am a businessman, I'm an insurance agent, I own my own insurance agency. And Ed, how's the insurance business? Well, Ken, it's going okay. This month it's a little rocky. Well, Ed, what's your number? I say, what, my phone number? No, what's your number? How many sales are you making? I said, well, you know, I made a few sales. He says, well, how many people do you have to talk to make those sales? What's your number? I said, Ken, what do you mean, what is my number? He says, well, if you make, say, 10 sales in a week, or 20 sales in a week, maybe perhaps you have to talk to maybe 50 people. And if you talk to those number of people, then whatever your goal is, whatever your sales are, whatever you want your sales to be for that week, then it's going to average out. So if your number is 50 people, then you got to talk to those 50 people. And I've adopted that philosophy. So every week I know what my number is. I know how many people I have to talk to, you know, secure so many appointments to get so many sales. And it works perfectly. So, you know, we're very successful. We do very well. And I just want to thank Ken for that. He just had time to talk to the common person and always has something that you can hang your hat on. So from myself, again, myself and South Bay is here, we're here, we love Ken, we love the family. Again, I thank you for this opportunity.
Anyone? Okay, I think. My brother Chris Wilson.
Just a couple words, people. I just wanted to, before my brother wraps things up, I wanted to once again thank everybody for coming out here. And just hearing all the stories and meeting you all, a lot of whom I've never met tonight, or met before tonight. But just seeing the different worlds and the different people that my dad touched over the years, the way he's presented my father to you, and all the stories. And all I can say is that, you know, everything I'm hearing tonight is true. I can confirm all of it. He was just the greatest dad to have. And to have him gone from my life is, you know, I'm not even going to get into that. But it's just, thank you again for being here. And I'm going to listen.
Well, we've been together all this time, now my brother is making me cry. Yeah, you know, all I can say to, just to want, you know, in finishing is, my dad would be so pleased with this day, and so many great stories. Thank you so much, and thank you all for coming out. There's not a lot of time before we kind of have to pack this up, but I hope you all hang out, you know, have some food. And again, just thanks so much for coming and sharing all the stories. Thank you.